Stop staring, that hotel doesn't belong to their family anymore. A man standing in the crowd shook his head, and tugged the sleeve of the person beside him, turning away. Old man Okoro is gone, a woman said, gazing toward the building by the sea, and she let out a long sigh. The bank came to seal it up this morning. A young man smirked. The owner's daughter? By tomorrow she'll probably be cleaning hotel rooms for someone else. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Quiet laughter, but sharp enough to cut skin. In the last of the afternoon rain, a 19-year-old girl stood holding her mother tightly. Behind the two of them, a man from the bank was unscrewing a brass sign, from the front gate, the same sign she had grown up beneath her whole life. Ocean View Hotel. A police officer locked the iron gate. One by one, the townspeople drifted away, leaving behind a soaked street, and a family standing alone, before the door of their own home. The girl let go of her mother's hand, and stepped forward. She placed her palm against the old, rain-streaked wall, right on the spot where, when she was 7 years old, her father had held her small hand, and taught her how to bow, and greet their very first guest of the day. Her tears rolled down, mixing with the rain, so that no one could tell the difference. She whispered, so softly that only the wall could hear. I promise you, Papa. I will take this hotel back. And then the screen goes dark. Hello, my friend. Come, sit here with me a while. Tonight's story begins, with a promise whispered in the rain, and it stretches across 15 long years. It is the story of a girl, who lost everything in a single afternoon, and of the one thing, that no bank, no swindler, and no cruel laughter could ever seize, from a human being. That thing is the will to rise. People may take the roof, from over your head. But what you carry in your heart, and in your two hands, they must leave behind. Some things fate can only delay. It can never truly steal them. If stories like this warm your heart, subscribe and turn on the bell, so you can walk this whole road, with me, all the way to the end. Now then, let us go back. 15 years, to the beginning. Back then, the whole family lived on the Ocean View Hotel. They were not rich. The hotel had only 25 rooms, a small building leaning out toward the sea, its white paint gone yellow under years of sun and salt. But Mr. Okoro, Amina's father, was known across the whole region, as the kindest man a guest could ever hope to meet. He remembered the name of every regular. He remembered that the Englishman liked his tea strong, with a little ginger, and that the old woman, from the capital, who came once a year, always needed a firmer pillow than the rest. He had a saying, that Amina heard, so often she knew it by heart, a saying that, one day, would become the compass for her entire life. Guests don't come back for the bed, my child. There are beds everywhere. They come back for the feeling of being welcomed. A person can forget a beautiful room. But they never forget the feeling of someone being truly glad to see them walk through the door. From the time she was very small, Amina loved to trot along, after her father, through every corner of the hotel. She helped him carry luggage, even when the suitcases were nearly as big as she was. She watered the pots of hibiscus along the entrance path. She learned to fold bath towels into the shape of a fan, the kind that made every guest gasp with delight. But Mr. Okoro never let his daughter grow up knowing only the hotel. He gave her a proper education, and when she was old enough, he sent her to the city to study hospitality management, because he wanted his daughter, one day, not only to love this work, with her heart, but to understand it, with real knowledge. And her father would always place his hand on top of her head, and say, one day, this ocean view will be yours. You will be the one standing at that front desk, welcoming guests with your smile. Amina believed it. She grew up with that belief the way a person grows up, with sunlight, something obvious, something that needed no questioning. She remembered one afternoon in particular. A guest had arrived furious, his room booking had been lost, the sea was gray, with storm, and he had driven for 6 hours for nothing. He shouted. He slammed his fist on the counter. A younger Amina, only 10, shrank behind her father's leg. But Mr. Okoro did not shout back. He came out, from behind the desk, took the man's bag from his hand himself, and said quietly, "You are tired, and you are far from home. Sit. Let me bring you tea, and we will fix everything after that." By the time the tea was finished, the man was laughing. He came back to Ocean View every year for the next 11 years. That night, her father knelt beside her and said, "Remember this, my girl. Anyone can serve a happy customer. It is the angry, tired, broken ones who show you who you really are." She was too young then to know she would spend her whole life proving him right. But there was one thing a good man like Mr. Okoro never imagined. That trust, placed in the wrong hands, can become the very door through which a thief walks in. The year Amina turned 19, her father dreamed a bigger dream. He wanted to expand the hotel, to build a new wing of rooms facing the sea, and a restaurant right there on the sand. Mr. Okoro had run Ocean View with his own 2 hands for decades, and he understood his work down to the smallest detail. The fact that he personally greeted every guest each day was not because he couldn't afford to hire someone, but because to him, that was the soul of the trade. But a large expansion project like this was a different matter. It required a bank loan that was far from small, tangled construction contracts, and a whole stack of legal paperwork that even a seasoned man needs an expert to handle properly. And so he turned to his closest friend, Chief Bassi. He was not only a friend Mr. Okoro had known since their youth, a man who had eaten at his dinner table more times than anyone could count, a man the children of the house all called uncle. He was also a man who worked in finance, who knew the law, who was fluent in the ways of banks, exactly the kind of expertise Mr. Okoro believed he needed for this great venture. And that was the very thing that made his trust so deadly. Chief Bassi said he would take care of everything. He told Mr. Okoro to simply sign a power of attorney, so that he could act on his behalf, with the bank and the authorities, to keep things quick and smooth. After all, this was the work that fell squarely within his expertise. And Mr. Okoro, trusting his friend, as he trusted himself, trusting in the man's profession, signed. He never dreamed that the power of attorney had been drawn up so broadly that it handed the other man almost total control over everything he owned. That was the mistake that stole it all. Because Chief Bassi never intended to expand the hotel. He used that very power of attorney, together with Mr. Okoro's signature, which he had studied, until he could forge it on other documents, to borrow an enormous sum from the bank, putting up Ocean View itself as collateral. Then he drained that money, moved it abroad, and vanished. When the first demand letter arrived from the bank, Mr. Okoro thought it was a mistake. By the time he understood the truth, that the closest friend of his life had gambled his entire fortune, and then fled, it was far too late. He ran everywhere, knocking on the door of every lawyer, every acquaintance he had. But the paperwork was valid. The signature, at least on its surface, was his own. And the one person who could testify to the truth was long gone. One evening, in the middle of sitting before a stack of debt notices, Mr. Okoro clutched his chest and collapsed. A heart attack. He died in the very hotel he had spent his whole life building, beneath the wall, where his daughter had so often stood to welcome the guests. And only a few weeks after the funeral, the bank came to seal Ocean View shut. That was the rainy afternoon we saw at the beginning of our story. That was the afternoon a 19-year-old girl placed her hand on an old wall, and whispered a promise that, at the time, no one, not even she herself, believed could ever come true. After the hotel was gone, the family lost their place in that small town as well. The house they lived in had been part of the seized property too. Her mother collapsed under the weight of it. Her younger brother, Daniel, only 12 at the time, was far too young to understand what was happening. Amina understood one thing very clearly: if she fell, there would be no one left to rise in her place. So she did not allow herself to fall. She sent her mother and brother to stay with an aunt in the countryside, and then, alone, she boarded a bus to Lagos, the big city, where she believed that anyone willing to work hard would surely find a job. But Lagos did not welcome her. She knocked on one door after another. A 19-year-old girl, who had just been forced to drop out of university halfway through, a degree she never got to hold in her hands, not a single day of formal work experience, and not one connection in this strange, enormous city. The only capital she owned was a childhood spent growing up inside her father's hotel, something no job application would ever recognize. People shook their heads. Some didn't even bother to look at her a second time. Those first weeks in Lagos were the hardest she had ever lived. She slept in the corner of a cheap, crowded room she shared, with 4 other women she did not know, her small bag clutched against her chest even in sleep. She learned which street vendors sold the cheapest bread at the end of the day, when the price dropped. She walked instead of taking the bus, because every coin she saved was a coin she could send back to her mother. There was one night, she would admit it to no one for years, when she sat on the edge of a curb, watching the lights of a grand hotel across the road, and came so close to giving up, that she could taste it. She thought of buying a ticket back to the village, of disappearing into the small, safe smallness of a life that asked nothing of her. And then she thought of her father's hand on that rain-soaked wall, and the promise she had made. She wiped her face, stood up, and knocked on one more door the next morning. At last, after weeks of near starvation, a 3-star hotel in the center of the city took her in. Not into the front desk position she had always dreamed of. Not to that brightly lit welcome counter. They took her into the housekeeping department. Housekeeping. The one who cleans the rooms. In those years, one day was the same as the next. At 4 in the morning, Amina woke. She cleaned rooms, changed bed sheets, scrubbed toilets, vacuumed hallways, and washed towers of towels that reached up to her chest. The same hands that had once folded towels into the shape of a fan to make guests gasp were now cracked and raw from cleaning chemicals. There were co-workers who knew where she came from. And they would not let her forget it. "Look, it's the hotel owner's daughter," one of them laughed, seeing her bent over, scrubbing a toilet. The hotel owner's daughter, now cleaning toilets in someone else's hotel. That's life for you. Amina only smiled. She never argued back, not a single word. It was not because it didn't hurt. It hurt, of course it did. Every one of those words was like a needle. But she had learned something, that people who love to mock others never understand, that when you stay silent, and keep on working, you are not being weak. You are simply pouring all of your strength into what truly matters, instead of wasting it on people who only deserve for you to walk past them. People mistook her silence for surrender. They did not know that inside that silence, something was growing. There was one evening she never forgot. She was pushing her cleaning cart down a hallway, when she heard a familiar voice, a couple checking in at the front desk, an older man and his wife. She froze. It was the Englishman, the one who liked his tea with ginger, a guest who had come to Ocean View every year of her childhood. For one terrible moment she wanted to hide, to turn the cart around, to not be seen bent over in a housekeeping uniform by someone who had known her as the owner's proud little girl. But then she straightened her back. She walked past, and when the man's eyes met hers, she smiled and greeted him warmly, the way her father had taught her, and said only, "Welcome. I hope your stay is a beautiful one." He did not recognize her. Why would he? But she recognized herself in that moment, and she understood that her father's lessons did not belong to a building. They belonged to her. No bank could seal them shut. That night she wrote in her notebook, in letters pressed hard into the page, "A uniform is not a verdict. It is a chapter." Because every night, after a shift of more than a dozen hours, when her body was so exhausted it wanted nothing but to collapse into bed. Amina would take out a small notebook. And she would write. She wrote down everything she had observed that day. What had upset the guest in room 204, and how the manager had soothed him. The way the best receptionist smiled, through the telephone, so completely that the person on the other end could actually hear the smile. The way the hotel handled a complaint, so that a furious guest was transformed into a loyal one. What made guests come back? What made them never return? She was not just cleaning rooms. She was learning how to run an entire hotel, from the very lowest position, the place where, as it turned out, a person can see the truth more clearly than anywhere else. One night, the hotel's elderly general manager, a man named Mr. Adeyemi, who had once run large resorts, before coming here for the final years of his career, caught her writing in a corner of the staff break room close to midnight. Curious, he picked up the notebook and looked. He read, and his eyebrows lifted. "Why do you write all this down?" he asked. Amina hesitated, then told him the truth. She told him about Ocean View. About her father. About the promise in the rain. Mr. Adeyemi was silent for a very long moment. Then he said something she would carry for the rest of her life. "If you want to take back your father's hotel, you cannot simply mourn it. You must understand hotels better than anyone who has ever walked through that door. You must become so good that, when the opportunity comes, you are the only one who is ready." And from that day, he began to teach her. For free. After hours. He taught her the things that schools take years to reveal: how to read a revenue report, how to calculate an occupancy rate, how a hotel makes money, and how it quietly bleeds it, how to keep your staff, how to build what he called the soul of a place to stay. "Anyone can buy nice furniture," he told her one night, tapping the table with a wrinkled finger. "Anyone with money can hang a chandelier. But you cannot buy the moment a guest walks in exhausted and feels, without being told, that they are safe here. That is not decoration. That is discipline. It is 1,000 small choices made correctly, every single day, by people who care." He looked at her for a long moment. "The bank took your father's building. It did not take his gift. The question is whether you are willing to spend 10 years learning to carry it." Amina met his eyes, and said, simply, "I am." He nodded, as if he had known the answer, before he asked. And he never doubted her again. 10 years passed. Not 10 easy years. 10 years of one step at a time, slow and patient. From housekeeping, Amina was moved to the laundry department. Then to the front desk. At last she got to stand at that brightly lit counter, welcoming guests with the very smile her father had taught her. Then guest relations, then front office supervisor, then duty manager, and finally, operations manager for the entire hotel. Alongside the work, she studied. The hotel had a program that helped cover tuition for outstanding employees, and Amina seized every scholarship like a drowning person grabbing a lifeline. She picked up the studies she had left unfinished at 19, this time working, and studying at once, paying for it, with her own sweat. She completed her hospitality management program. She learned to speak English with real polish. She studied marketing, basic accounting, human resource management. Working by day, studying by night, the certificates slowly filled a whole drawer. She had become exactly what Mr. Adeyemi told her she must become, someone who understood hotels better than nearly anyone around her. But life, as it so often does, was not finished with her yet. The hotel changed owners. The new owner arrived, and the first thing he did was cut costs, cut people. Old Mr. Adeyemi had already retired long before. And in that round of layoffs, Amina, as skilled as she was on the list to be let go, simply because the salary of an operations manager was something the new owner wanted to save. After 10 years of building, once again she found herself, with nothing, at least where work was concerned. Her friends told her, with your experience, finding another job is easy. Send out a few applications, and you'll have work in no time. And for the first time in her life, Amina refused. Because in that moment of losing her job, something suddenly became clear to her. For 10 years, she had learned to run hotels for other people. She had poured out her sweat to make names that were not hers grow rich. And she was good enough now, ripe enough, to do the thing she should have started long ago. She would not go begging for a job anymore. She would build a place of her own. She gathered everything she had. The savings from 10 years of frugal living. A small amount of her father's insurance money, that her mother had guarded like a final treasure. And a small loan, that she had to present her business plan to the bank 3 times, before they finally approved it. With that meager capital, she rented an old house sitting right by the sea in a small tourist town. Just 4 rooms. She gave it a name, Blue Shore Guest House. On the very first day it opened, not a single guest came. On the second day, still none. But Amina did not sit and wait. She did everything with her own 2 hands. She swept the yard, repainted the peeling walls. She cooked breakfast for guests, who had not yet appeared. She washed the sheets, cleaned the rooms, sat at the front desk, and served as her own porter too. For rooms, one woman, 18 hours a day. Then a foreign couple, lost on the road, stopped in to try one night. But before them, there had been a test that nearly broke her. In the 3rd week, when the 4 rooms still sat empty, and the loan payment loomed, a single guest arrived, a stern businessman, who complained about everything. The water was not hot enough. The road was too loud. The breakfast was too simple. Amina could have snapped. She was exhausted, frightened, and one bad review from a man like this could sink her, before she had even begun. Instead, she remembered a furious man, and a cup of ginger tea, and her father coming out from behind the desk. She did not argue. She fixed what she could, apologized for what she couldn't, and treated him, hour after hour, exactly as she would have treated a king. On the morning he left, the man paused at the door. "I travel constantly," he said gruffly. "I am never comfortable anywhere." "I was comfortable here." He booked 3 more nights on the spot. It was not the foreign couple's review that saved Blue Shore first. It was a difficult man, won over the slow way, the only way Amina knew. And Amina welcomed the foreign couple, with everything she had learned, from her father, from 15 years of her life. She remembered their names. She noticed that the wife was allergic to seafood, so the breakfast she cooked the next morning was a different dish, made just for her. She sat and talked with them about this stretch of coast, as though they were old friends stopping by, after a long time apart. Before they left, that couple wrote a single review online, a line that would one day change everything. "This is the smallest place we have ever stayed in Nigeria. But it is also the warmest. We arrived as guests, and we left as family." That review spread. Then another, then another. People began seeking out the tiny 4-room guesthouse by the sea, just to feel the one thing that no 5-star hotel could sell, the feeling of coming home. From 4 rooms, Blue Shore grew to 8. Then 15. Then she rented the plot of land next door, and turned it into a small boutique hotel. Then into a resort. Her old guests always came back. And whenever anyone asked them why, the answer was almost always the same. Not because it was the most luxurious. Not because it was the cheapest. Because there, everyone is treated like family. Amina had taken her father's very philosophy, that saying she had heard, since she was 7 years old, and turned it into a small empire built out of kindness. She had proven that the greatest lesson her father left her was written on no document that any bank could seize. It lived in the way she treated a human being who crossed her threshold. But the promise in the rain was still there. Still unfinished. Through all those years, Ocean View Hotel, her father's hotel, had sat there, decaying more with each passing day. Passed through the hands of a few speculators, with no one truly caring for it, it withered like an old man left behind. The paint peeled from the walls. The hibiscus she had once watered dried and died. In the end, it was put up for auction, and this time, almost no one wanted to buy an old, run-down building that carried a reputation for bad luck. On the day of the auction, a black SUV slowly pulled up in front of the old hotel. The night before, she had come alone. She had parked across the road, just as she had stood across that same road 15 years earlier, and she looked at the ruined shape of Ocean View against the dark sea. The gate hung crooked. The windows were black and empty. The hibiscus was gone. For a long time she did not move. She was not 34 in that moment, she was 19, soaked to the skin, with her hand on a cold wall. She let herself feel all of it, the grief, the rage, the 15 years, and then she let it go, breath by breath, until what was left was steady and quiet. "Tomorrow, Papa," she whispered to the dark. "Tomorrow I keep my word." Then she drove home, and slept, deeply, for the first time in weeks. The door opened. Amina stepped out. She was 34 now, in a simple, but immaculate suit, moving with the bearing of a woman who had walked through many storms, and no longer feared a single one. A few of Ocean View's old staff, people who had once worked for her father, now gathered to watch the auction, recognized her. One of them whispered, his voice trembling, That's Mr. Okoro's daughter. That's little Amina from all those years ago." The auction began in a stuffy room. There were only a few listless investors, come to eye a cheap bargain. Many of them saw Amina walk in and sit down, but no one paid her any mind. They thought she was just a curious local, or at most a former employee come to look at the old place one last time. Not one of them knew that the woman sitting quietly in that row of chairs was in fact an investor, and the one person who had been preparing for this exact moment for 15 years. The bidding went on. One investor made an offer. Amina quietly raised her paddle. The other man bid higher. She raised it again, her face without a flicker of emotion. Round after round, the others dropped out one by one, staring in surprise at the calm woman, who kept gently lifting her price, without the slightest hesitation. Until only she remained. The hammer came down. A single dry crack rang out, through the silent room. Sold. The Ocean View Hotel now belongs to Miss Amina Okoro. The whole room went dead silent. A few of the old staff standing at the back raised their hands to their mouths. Some had already begun to cry. The name Okoro, the name that 15 years earlier people had used to mock her in the streets, had just been spoken aloud, as the name of the new owner. And somewhere far away, they say Chief Bassi, the man who had swindled her father, never found any joy in the fortune he stole either. Living and hiding on foreign soil, he squandered it all on gambling, and one collapsed venture, after another, until he died in poverty and loneliness, with not a single friend at his side, for a man who has betrayed his closest friend can never again hold anyone's trust. Amina never once went looking for him for revenge. She did not need to. She understood that the most beautiful answer to a person who has tried to destroy you is not to destroy them in return, it is to live a life so full that they can never reach it. 1 year later, Ocean View Hotel opened its doors again. Amina had the old brass sign restored, the very sign she had watched being unscrewed in the rain 15 years before. She kept the name. She did not change it to something grander, something more fashionable. It was still those same 3 words, Ocean View Hotel. Because that name was not hers. It belonged to her father. And she had only brought it home. On the day of the reopening, she seated her mother, and Daniel, now a grown young man, in the seats of honor. She invited back every one of her father's old staff she could find, and offered them their jobs again, if they wanted them. Her mother, who had aged so much in those 15 years, who had cried herself to sleep in a borrowed bed in a village far away, walked slowly through the restored lobby, with one trembling hand pressed to her mouth. She stopped where the old front desk used to be. "He would not believe it," she whispered. "He would not believe what you have done." Amina took her mother's hand, and said, "He always believed it. He told me so when I was 7 years old. I am only the one who was late." And Daniel, the little boy, who had been too young to understand the day they lost everything, now stood tall in a clean suit, and he could not speak at all. He simply put his arm around his sister's shoulders, the way she had put hers around him on the worst day of their lives. Then, as the first guests began to walk in, Amina crossed the new lobby alone. She passed the front desk, where her father had once stood. She stopped before a photograph hanging in a place of honor on the wall, a photograph of Mr. Okoro, smiling, the picture she had kept, and protected through all her years of wandering. She set a bouquet of white flowers down beneath it. She looked up at her father's face, and smiled, though the corners of her eyes had gone wet. "Papa," she said softly. "I brought the hotel home." The camera pulls slowly back. The sea is still, as blue as it ever was. Guests come and go, and laughter fills the whole lobby. And right below the photograph of that father, there is a line, carved into the wall, a line that sums up an entire life, and an entire story. The most beautiful hotel is not the one with the most stars, it is the one where every guest feels they have come home. I tell you the story of Amina, my friend, not only so you can feel glad about a happy ending. I tell it, because inside that story are lessons that your life and mine should both hold close. The first lesson, for anyone who is building anything, with the sweat of their own body, be careful what you put your signature on. Mr. Okoro was a good man, but goodness is no substitute for caution. A power of attorney drawn too broadly, a signature laid down, without being read closely, can hand your entire fortune into the hands of another. Read every line. Ask until it is clear. Let someone you truly trust, and who is truly independent, review your important documents for you. To trust a person is a beautiful thing, but protecting what is yours is not a lack of trust. It is your duty to the people you love. The second lesson, for anyone standing at the bottom, people can take the roof from over your head, your name, even your years. But what you learn, what you become, no one can seize that. Amina began again, from the lowest position, the one who cleans the rooms, and it was, from that lowest place, that she saw the road no one else could see. Never look down on the first rung of the ladder. Very often, it is exactly where you will learn the most precious thing of all. And the final lesson, treat every person who crosses your life like a guest coming home. Because in the end, what people remember about you is not how rich you became. It is how you made them feel. People may unscrew the sign from the gate of your home. But if you hold fast to the promise in your heart, then one day, you will be the one who hangs it back up. This has been Chi Chi Tales. Until the next story, walk in wisdom.